Before I put the question to the House, I do want to reiterate a warning that was given by the Speaker at the general debate yesterday with regard to the reading of speeches. While there is some flexibility, especially for ministers on the first reading where they are making technical remarks, that was not the case in this particular speech, and while it was appropriate to refer to notes for figures, and there were a number of figures, especially in the early part, I want to caution members about reading speeches. The question is, the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
Kelvin Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Labour Party supports the drug and alcohol testing of community-based offenders and Bailees legislation bill. And, Mr. Speaker, it goes without saying that the use and the abuse of alcohol in our communities is fairly rampant. Also, the use and abuse of drugs such as cannabis are pretty rampant in many communities, as is now sadly the use and abuse of harder drugs such as methamphetamine, otherwise known as P. I've spoken in this House before, Mr. Speaker, of students or a family of students at the school I used to be principal of who had an intimate knowledge of the production and the consumption of P. That's because for their parents and their parents' associates, it was just a regular part of their week to imbibe of that drug. Also, I remember a youth aid officer telling me that in one house that he raided, and this was a house where a student attended, the student of the school I was principal of, he said in 14 places around the lounge where you and I may have chips or nuts on the armchair of the arm of the chair or on the coffee table, or they had marijuana just there, accessible with kids all around, and that, Mr. Speaker, is again unacceptable. Then there was the infamous league competition up north where the player of the day, instead of receiving his $20 meat pack from the local butcher, in fact received an ounce of marijuana. Mr. Speaker, this just emphasises and highlights how normalised in many communities drugs and alcohol are, and in how normalised many drugs and alcohol are in many families. So let's imagine then how difficult it is for an offender who's on a community-based sentence if the use of drugs and alcohol is normalised in his or her life, how difficult it is for them to voluntarily abstain from partaking of drugs and alcohol. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we need a system that has to impose abstinence on these people. I remember a kaumātua saying to me up north there that sometimes the only way to get people to do the right thing or to change is to seriously inconvenience them. And this bill, Mr. Speaker, will seriously inconvenience offenders in that they will be made to undergo if the conditions of their community-based sentence say that they must abstain from drugs and alcohol, they will be made to undergo testing. They will be made to provide samples, bodily samples, to see if there's alcohol or drugs in their systems. And so it will be an inconvenience for them, but Mr. Speaker, sometimes that's the price that we do have to pay to make sure that we live in a safe society. There are safeguards within the bill which the Select Committee will examine to make sure that, as the Minister has said, people's rights aren't going to be overly imposed. We've got to make sure that this does in fact comply with the Bill of Rights. And the bill itself does give us the proper authority in which to undergo this testing regime, Mr. Speaker. So what does the bill do? And the Minister has spelt out what the bill does. It allows police and corrections to require community-based offenders to undergo the drug and alcohol testing regime, or to monitor them for drugs and alcohol in their systems. The offender, he must be advised by a judicial officer or the registrar up front that they will be made to undergo the monitoring by an authorised person, and if they are advised, then they must do so. There are a number of areas that, as I've said, that the Select Committee needs to scrutinise and examine. Some of these things are the types of testing procedures that the offenders will have to undergo, the regularity of the testing, the consequences for prohibiting an authorised person from coming along to conduct the tests, the types of drug and alcohol testing devices, and that's I think that's really important that we examine that. There are a range of drug and alcohol monitoring and testing devices. I believe other jurisdictions around the world have already implemented systems like this, and it would be really good to hear at the Select Committee stage what those monitoring devices are, how they actually work, the technical functions around those devices, Mr. Speaker, how often and how long continuous testing may be, how long continuous testing may be carried out, minimum levels of controlled drugs and alcohol as well in the system. There's no argument that drugs and alcohol are a major driver of crime in the country. And in fact, a district court judge from up north said to me that if we could miraculously eliminate alcohol from up north, that 90% of his business would disappear overnight. And that's quite a telling sort of comment from a district court judge who every day has to deal with incidences where crime have been committed because of drug and alcohol abuse. As the Minister has rightly pointed out, 48%, almost half of offenders report at the time they're arrested that they have been using at least one drug. And 2/3, 60%, the Minister said, of offenders on home detention or supervision, they have a drug or alcohol addiction issue. So that just illustrates the serious nature, the seriousness, just how rampant drug and alcohol issues are and their contribution to crime. As the Minister said, 5,000 community-based offenders, or he said 4,000, I've read 5,000 community-based offenders and 15,000 Bailees have some abstinence conditions imposed on them as part of their sentence. Overseas drug and alcohol testing is used, and evidence shows that it is effective. And so, as I've said, I'd be interested to hear just what makes it so effective and what we can do to improve on that. What are some of the ups and downs that those overseas jurisdictions experienced as they were implementing similar systems? There are 3 principles that need to be applied consistently. And again, the Minister's gone over them. One is that the testing is no more intrusive than is reasonably necessary. The second is that testing takes place no more often than is necessary. And the third, of course, is we make sure that the testing and the monitoring does maintain a person's dignity and the right to privacy. A positive test for drugs and alcohol can be used as evidence of non-compliance with the drug and alcohol conditions imposed on an offender and a Bailee, and the offenders or the Bailee, they need to understand that this can be used against them. There are offences for non-compliance, such as refusing an authorised person access to the home to conduct the testing, for tampering with the devices, for diluting or manipulating any samples. And I just want to go back briefly to the technology around the testing, because the testing devices and their accuracy, which is something I'd like to explore. Again, when I was a school teacher, we had a policeman come in to the school to talk to kids about their police equipment, and they kids got it to sit in the car and turn on the sirens and the lights and everything, but the policeman actually brought out a roadside breath testing kit. And he lined up half a dozen kids and got them to speak their names into the device, and they, of course, came up with negative results. Then he got them to gargle Listerine and spit it out, and then say their name and address, and it came up with a positive result because the device is able to pick up the alcohol in the Listerine. He also said that perfume and cologne, if it's alcohol-based, can also pick up the alcohol. So therefore, any device that's attached and maybe picks up the sweat, the alcohol content in sweat, it may actually also pick up the alcohol in the cologne and perfume. So those are just some of the issues that we need to examine as a select committee. Mr. Speaker, as I said, the Labour Party supports the bill.